Okay, let's unpack this truly wild piece of media criticism we've got today. We're diving into a source that just ripped apart a highly publicized address, something called the Alternative Christmas Message, delivered by a very famous U.S. late-night host. And this address, which, I mean, let's be honest, almost certainly went unnoticed by most Americans.
Oh, for sure.
It generated a blistering response from our source material, and it touches on, well, everything from corporate greed to international free speech law.
What's so fascinating here, and where this deep dive really pivots, is that it's not about the substance of the host's message.
Right.
I mean, he was giving this grand warning about fascism and tyranny in the United States. But the source material focuses entirely on the spectacular irony of it all.
The messenger himself.
The messenger, his immense wealth, the specific location he chose to give the speech, and, the timing. It's really a case study in transatlantic media conflict.
Yeah.
And the primary battle is over who exactly has the credibility to claim they're being oppressed.
Exactly. The source material we're using is a critical and highly detailed breakdown from a YouTube channel called Clownfish TV, and they are not holding back at all.
Not at all.
Their fundamental thesis is that this host is not some persecuted martyr for free speech. They see him as a hypocritical, out-of-touch multimillionaire who is actively leveraging political controversy to secure his own high-paying job.
And in their view, grossly misrepresenting the facts around his own career setbacks.
Yeah. It is a highly, highly opinionated reaction, and our job today is to meticulously map out every single one of their claims, no matter how explosive they get.
So our mission today is pretty complex because we have to separate these really charged claims from their context. We have to establish what the alternative Christmas message even is, what it traditionally means in the UK.
Right, because most of us over here wouldn't know.
Then we have to look at the specific claims of U.S. tyranny that were made, and then critically analyze the counterclaims this source presents. And those counterclaims are really about their deep-seated concerns with political correctness, alleged government control, and what they call wrongthink.
That phrase wrongthink keeps coming up.
It does, and they claim it's rampant in the UK. So we need to understand why the source views the UK, the very country the host chose for his soapbox, as the true locale.
And as a quick teaser for you, the listener, we are going deep into the financial and the corporate mechanics of all this.
This is the really interesting part.
It is. The source doesn't just mention the host's reported salary of $16 million. They use it as the entire backdrop for the critique.
It's the central exhibit.
It really is.
Yeah.
And even more interesting, we are going to explore a very convoluted but I think intriguing theory involving alleged White House threats, panicked TV affiliates,
right,
and how these massive media corporations like Disney might use political outrage, ironically, as a sophisticated defense mechanism.
A defense against what?
To avoid greater regulatory scrutiny from the Federal Communications Commission, the FCC. So stick around, because this dive has, believe it or not, far more to do with corporate maneuvering than it does with fascism. Let's start with the basics then, because for many Americans, myself included, the idea of an alternative Christmas message is entirely foreign.
Yeah.
It sounds like a joke, but it's actually rooted in genuine, high-profile political commentary across the pond.
It is a genuinely significant platform. It's not some small YouTube show. This is a big deal. And that's exactly why the source material fixates on the irony of who they chose as their.
So what is it exactly?
The Alternative Christmas Message is an annual tradition in the UK that goes all the way back to 1993. Its entire raison d'etre, its whole purpose, is to serve as a deliberate
A counterpoint to the Queen's speech. Or now the King's speech.
Precise. The monarch's annual televised Christmas address to the Commonwealth. That's the target.
Okay, and the monarch's address is usually very formal, stately, focusing on tradition and national pride.
Yeah.
Very unifying.
Very much so. The alternative version is designed to be the opposite. It's meant to be edgier, more political, more culturally reflective. It often features celebrities, cultural figures, activists, people with a point.
And the source material actually defines its purpose, right?
They do. They cite a quote from a UK source, I think they call it Shellforce, who explained that the message is intended to be a thought-provoking and personal reflection pertinent to the events of the year.
Pertinent to the events of the year. So it's supposed to be relevant.
It's supposed to be relevant to a British audience, which brings us to the big question.
Why this specific U.S. host?
Exact. The source material repeatedly refers to him with, well, let's just say highly critical and colorful language.
I think unfunny and an idiot was one of the Kinder descriptions.
It was, and they seriously question why a UK audience would even care what he has to say.
They had that one joke, didn't they?
Yeah, they did. They jokingly suggest it was payback for James Corden.
Right. The transatlantic host exchange.
Exactly. Referencing another British host who had a pretty polarizing tenure in U.S. late-night TV. But, jokes aside, they argued that for a major forum of political commentary, to select a figure whose political alignment is so specific to the U.S. Democratic Party and whose professional standing in his own country is, according to the source, dubious at best.
It seems like a strange choice.
It seems like a calculated move meant purely to stir controversy rather than offer some genuine reflection for the British.
And what was the specific controversy he stirred? What did he actually say?
According to the sources, the host took aim at U.S. President Donald Trump and explicitly warned Thursday about the rise of fascism in his address to viewers.
So he went right for the jugular.
Immediately. He fundamentally used this foreign platform to present himself as a victim of political persecution back home.
Is there a specific quote they honed in on?
Oh, yeah. The one that truly caught the source's attention, the one they used to frame their entire critique, was that my country's president would like to shut me up because I don't adore him.
Wow. Okay, so let's drill down into that claim of tyranny. He's on a British platform telling the UK audience, and I guess the wider Commonwealth, that tyranny is booming over here in the US.
Yes. And that he, a wealthy, nightly televised comedian, is facing genuine persecution simply for criticizing the sitting president.
And this is where the source material unleashes.
This is their foundational critique, the absolute staggering irony of the messenger. The host presents this narrative of being oppressed and silenced, yet the source immediately and aggressively undermines that claim.
How?
By pointing to his immense financial privilege. They argue that people might want to shut him up, not because he's some oppressed political dissident, but because, in their view, he's simply annoying AF and his ratings.
They really, really hammer home the financial disparity. That salary number comes up again and again.
It's the rhetorical centerpiece of their entire argument. They explicitly cite his reported salary as $16 million effing dollars a year to tell everybody else about.
That's a powerful contrast.
It is. They contrast the financial reality with the public narrative he's spinning. The argument is that you cannot simultaneously be one of the highest paid figures in late night television.
Right.
Maintaining your job despite, they claim, poor ratings, while continuing to criticize the most powerful person in the free world on your show every single night.
And then
turn around and claim to be a victim of burgeoning fascism. It just doesn't compute for them. To the source, this isn't oppression.
What is it then?
It's a brilliant leveraging of political drama for relevance. And that enormous salary is their proof that the system, far from persecuting him, is actively rewarding his specific brand of political dissent.
So it changes the definition of persecution entirely. If your persecution comes with an 8-figure annual paycheck, the source suggests it's not persecution.
It's just content creation. It's a business model.
Exactly. And this really sets the stage for the next section, which I think is the core paradox of the whole situation. If he is so deeply worried about free speech tyranny in the U.S., why on earth would you choose a country that the sources claim has serious structural free speech issues of its own as your preferred podium?
It suggests to them a fundamental misunderstanding of the global landscape expression, or worse, a willful ignorance.
Which brings us to the location. The most potent critique in the source material revolves entirely around the fact that he gave this speech in the UK.
Yes. The claim is that discussing American tyranny and censorship while speaking on a major UK platform is just an act of spectacular ignorance.
Especially given the source's perception of the current state of free expression in the UK, which they see as highly regulated.
This is where the source contrasts the two nations drastically. They claim that the UK environment is characterized by what they call wrong thing.
Use that term again.
And they define it as a situation where citizens feel they are not allowed to say things on the internet or even think the wrong thing for fear of legal repercussions, prosecution, or even arrest.
That phrase, wrong thing, it's obviously borrowed from Orwellian language, and it's so central to their argument.
It is. It suggests that the U.S. host, speaking from his position of relative First Amendment protection, is completely oblivious to what the source considers the real systemic limitations on speech and thought.
What specific mechanisms do they point to that enforce this wrong thing? What are the examples?
They claim you have to self-censor everything you post or share online because the police might actually show up at your house.
For a tweet.
To question you over something that was considered grossly offensive or a hate crime, even if it was clearly intended as humor or just simple disagreement.
They also back this up with a very specific financial and legal claims related to public broadcast.
The BBC. They bring up the BBC, claiming that in the UK you are forced to pay for TV subscriptions, or you go to jail if you use TV.
Now that sounds extreme. Is that an exaggeration?
It's a maximalist claim, for sure. The source is aggressively framing the mandatory television licensing fee, which exists to fund the BBC.
Okay, so there is a mandatory fee.
Yes, there is. And while Non-payment can lead to prosecution, and ultimately, if you don't pay the fines, imprisonment is a possibility.
But it's rare.
The vast majority of cases just result in fine. But the source uses that extreme consequence, the threat of jail, to paint the entire UK system as intrinsically coercive and controlling of media.
And that stands in stark opposition to the image of the U.S. host as some champion of liberty.
That's their point. A system with mandatory financing for a state-backed news organ, enforceable by legal punishment, is a form of control that the host seems to willfully ignore while he's lecturing Americans about tyranny.
And then the claims get genuinely serious when they talk about online speech.
They do. The source suggests there is a very real danger of legal accountability for online expression. They go so far as to claim that there were attempts to deport Americans to stand trial for specific...
To stand trial for a tweet.
That's the claim. They characterize the environment as one where you have to answer for your social media.
And this is a critical point for them, right? It's meant to shock the listener.
It is. It suggests that the UK's jurisdiction for speech is so broad that someone operating under US First Amendment protections could theoretically be subject to UK law if their speech is deemed offensive or criminal.
And that's the tyranny the source thinks he should be worried about.
Exactly. They argue that while the US is debating whether the government contacted Disney, the UK is arresting people for jokes or online insults.
That distinction needs to be fully illustrated, and the source uses a very specific anecdote to crystallize what they mean by wrongthink, the story Count Dankula.
Yes. This anecdote is presented as the primary, tangible example of this restrict culture. The source details that this guy, Count Dankula, got into big trouble.
For what?
For teaching his girlfriend's dog to perform the Hitler salute as a joke for a YouTube video.
A joke involving a dog.
A pug, specifically. And the key distinction the source makes is that this was meant as clear, dark, satirical humor. The dog was responding to the phrase, gas the...
Okay, so obviously incredibly offensive, but the source frames it as satire.
Exactly. The guy spent a significant amount of time in court and was ultimately convicted under the Communications Act of 2003 for sending a grossly offensive...
And the source's argument is that in the U.S., that wouldn't happen.
Their argument is that in the U.S., while such a joke is universally considered tasteless and offensive, it would almost certainly be protected to the First Amendment because it's satire and clearly not incitement.
They bring up Mel Brooks, don't they?
They do. They reference Mel Brooks movies, like The Producers, which famously highly satirical, often offensive humor, as a protected form of expression in the U.S. context. Nobody's trying to arrest Mel Brooks.
So by using this example, the source is framing the UK legal system as hypersensitive to context and intent when offense.
And contrasting it sharply with a broader U.S. legal concept of free speech that allows for even profoundly distasteful. The source suggests that this legal trouble over a joke is the true definition of a lack.
And yet the U.S. host completely ignores this while warning the UK about these distant American political troubles.
It creates this powerful image of misplaced act. He's looking for fascism in D.C. while standing in a jurisdiction that, according to the source, comedy.
How do they summarize that point?
The host summarized this by arguing that the U.S. host is telling Brits to protest the government to say what you want to say in a country where you're not allowed to say you don't, or even criticize the monarch.
But wait. Calling him an agent of chaos and accusing him of inciting riots, isn't that a massive exaggeration of a Christmas message?
It sounds like it, but they justify it through the lens of hypocrisy.
Explain that.
They argue that by standing on a public UK platform and using the rhetoric of revolution, telling people they should demand the right to speak freely, he is stirring up discontent in a place where that kind of expression is already legally tenuous.
So they see it as incredibly reckless.
And irresponsible. They view him as advocating for activism in a place where that activism might have genuine personal legal consequences that he, as a visiting wealthy foreigner, would never face or even understand.
He drops the bomb and flies home.
And leaves the local consequences behind. That framing really drives home the source's belief that the host is fundamentally privileged and just blind to the realities outside his $16 million bubble.
Shifting our focus now, the source material dedicates a substantial portion of their critique to dismantling the host's personal narrative of being a persecuted figure. And they start immediately by just attacking his professional metric.
Right out of the gate. They label him unfunny and an idiot and point out that his late-night show had one of the lowest-rated late-night spots. They just claim his rate shit.
I mean, $16 million to be deemed unfunny? That's a serious definition of privilege the source is hitting on.
It makes it nearly impossible for him to claim victimhood, doesn't it?
It seems to be the foundation of their entire counterargument. If his ratings were objectively poor, as the source insists,
then any subsequent job movement or controversy is not proof of political persecution. It's just a reflection of corporate strategy in response to market failure.
And this sets up their analysis of his contract renewal, which happened despite these poor metrics.
The famous contract theory they proposed.
Let's drill down into that. The host was given a year extension despite these poor ratings, and the source claims this was not a merit-based decision at all. They say it was a calculated defense mechanism by Disney.
Correct. The theory suggested is that Disney, the parent company, gave him the extension simply to shut him up or to save face politically.
How would that work?
Well, think about the public relations disaster. Had they canceled his contract outright, the host, who had already established a highly visible, highly partisan political brand, could have immediately gone on a media tour crying, "Look, Disney's trying to silence me because I criticized the president."
That narrative would have been terrible for a massive media corporation trying to project neutrality.
Or at least trying to avoid the appearance of political.
So the extension was essentially a strategic corporate shield.
So they could say they gave him a chance.
Precisely. Disney could then point to the extension and say, "We gave you another year, but your performance continued to lag," proving the decision was based purely on performance, not politics.
So the source argues his $16 million value here is as a controversial figure that must be managed gently.
Managed strategically to prevent a PR night, not as a victim of sin. And this feeds directly into the most disputed claim the host made during that Christmas message.
The implication that the U.S. government or president tried to cancel his show.
The source strongly refutes this narrative with very specific internal detail.
They are adamant that the government was not involved. They cite Dana Walden, who is reportedly in charge of Disney's entertainment VS.
The official denial.
Right. Walden supposedly stated definitively that the White House never contacted them about the host's show. The source claims the host's narrative was basically an exaggeration that grew out of an offhanded comment on something online or something a podcast.
So this is where the deeper, more complex analysis comes in. The alternate theory the source proposed. If the White House didn't contact Disney, why did the show briefly go off the air? Why was there a crisis at all?
The source proposes it was genuine affiliate. To understand this, we need to clarify the U.S. broadcast structure. National network shows, like late-night comedy, are distributed through local affiliates all across the country. These local stations, though they're tied to the national brand, are independently owned and operated.
And they have the final say.
They have the final authority to air or pull specific programming.
The local stations decide what runs on their airway, even if it comes from the big national network in New York or L.A.
Exactly. And the source suggests that these local affiliates panicked. They pulled the show after the host made an offhanded comment right after a very sensitive event.
The source gets the event wrong.
They do. They inaccurately reference it as the assassination of Charlie Kirk, which just shows the heated nature of their internal comment. But the core point remained. The affiliates made the decision themselves because they felt the comments made it a really bad look in the market.
So the blame lies with the affiliate, not the White House.
According to the source, yes. The host blames the White House for what was actually a routine, albeit dramatic, business decision made by local broadcast partners reacting to bad optics and local audience out.
But the story doesn't end there, because the hosts tie this affiliate panic to the high-stakes political maneuvering of the larger corporate entity, Disney and the FCC.
And this is the real insight into corporate power suggested by the source. It's essential to this deep dive. They claim the affiliates were, in a sense, used as a shield.
Shield against what?
Against the The source reminds us that the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, regulates basically all broadcast media in the U.S.
And for massive media conglomerates like Disney, regulatory concerns from the FCC are a constant issue.
Always. Often relating to market concentration or potential antitrust issues, Disney is always under scrutiny for having too much power.
Okay, I think I'm following.
So if the government were seen to be directly controlling content, telling Disney to fire us, that could lead to a massive regulatory backlash, new investigations, new checks and balances aimed at limiting their power.
Right.
But if the local affiliates, the independently operated ground-level station, pull the content themselves, it just looks like a functioning, self-regulating media market.
So Disney can point to that and say, look, the system works. We don't need the government to impose new regulatory limits on us.
Precisely. Disney and its affiliates could claim self-regulation, thereby preempting potential FCC action or new legislative effort. They could argue the system works as is.
Because the local partners decided to pull the content when it caused an issue.
Right. And this, according to the source, means the host's controversy, ironically, becomes useful to Disney as a complex, multi-million-dollar defense mechanism against regulatory oversight.
That is truly fascinating. It reframes the entire incident from a free speech battle into a corporate chess game.
It does. And the source wraps up this section by just savaging the host's subsequent apology regarding the incident.
They call it a non-apology,
Yeah, they characterize it as, "I'm sorry you thought I said what I said."
which is the classic non-apology apology.
It implies the fault lies entirely with the audience's poor interpretation, not with the host's delivery or his comment. This reinforces the source's view that the host is fundamentally self-serving, more interested in maintaining the persecuted hero narrative than engaging with legitimate criticism or his decline.
So the entire incident, from comment to non-apology to contract renewal,
Is viewed through the lens of maximizing corporate spin and personal promotion.
now we shift focus from the host-specific professional narrative to the broader political environment. This is where the source asserts that the real tyranny and systemic silencing reside, not where the host claims.
This section flips the script entirely. The source claims that those on the host's political side don't want people with differing opinions to speak.
A strong claim.
And they assert that actual systemic silencing has occurred, driven largely by progressive political agendas and enabled by collaborations between government entities and powerful technology.
They specifically discuss the massive ban on quote-unquote misinformation. The source material is very quick to define this term.
Not as objective truth or falsehood, but rather as speech we did not like.
That definition is crucial because it implies malfeasance, right?
It does. The source argues that the rhetorical use of terms like misinformation or disinformation is simply a political tool used to suppress dissenting voice, especially those that challenge established narratives.
And they give a very potent example related to the COVID-19 pandemic. What's their argument there?
They claim that many things banned during the pandemic as conspiracy theories, like certain theories about the origin of the virus or the efficacy of non-pharmaceutical intervention, are now, according to them, accepted as fact.
Or at least are openly discussed in mainstream scientific forums.
Exactly. This implies a pattern of politically motivated censorship that was retrospectively proved wrong, or at least highly debated.
So the core argument is that the host is complaining about perceived governmental pressure that never materialized in his personal career,
Right.
while ignoring provable, current examples of political pressure resulting in actual systemic content suppression across vast social media platforms.
That's the core tension. They argue that tyranny is real, but it's operating in a subtle, decentralized way, primarily through corporate government collaboration, a censorship they refer to as happening under Biden.
And they differentiate this alleged soft censorship from the host's high-profile, disputed claim of government pressure.
Completely. Let's dedicate some time to detailing that claim because the source cites this alleged influence over social media as a provable fact.
Okay, what do they allege?
They allege that under the current administration, social media platforms were told to shadow ban certain people or to bury information.
This specific claim gained massive traction in conservative media circles, didn't it? Following revelations about internal communications at major tech platforms.
Often referred to collectively as the Twitter files.
Right.
The source points to these as evidence that government entities were actively communicating with or pressuring social media platforms to manipulate visibility, effectively creating systemic soft censorship.
And shadow banning is?
It refers to the practice where an account or a post is hidden or downgraded in visibility without the user being explicitly banned or notified. You just become invisible.
And they connect this directly to sensitive political topics, like the stories about the president's son, Hunter Biden.
They claim that platforms buried information and stories related to Hunter Biden's laptop and business dealings, asserting that platforms themselves later admitted they were told to shadow ban certain people or to bury information related to the story leading up to the election.
To the source, this is not just an allegation.
It's evidence of legitimate active government tyranny influencing private platforms to shape public perception and interfere with democratic. This is presented as far more threat than a celebrity TV show host facing some affiliate.
So this alleged government influence over platforms is framed as the true threat to free speech.
And the source uses this comparison to argue that the host's focus on his own muted cancellation minimizes the genuine concerns about systemic bias and political control over information flow that their own political opponents allegedly face daily.
So the host is essentially distracting from the deeper structural issues of free expression?
That's what they suggest. They accuse the host of being equally obsessed with owning Trump, as he claims Trump is obsessed.
And this hyperfocus.
This hyperfocus on a single political antagonist, according to source, is so powerful that it blinds him to the actual political maneuvering happening on his own side of the aisle maneuvering that the source claims amounts to actual censorship.
And this obsession leads to the hypocrisy critique, the double standard regarding what constitutes acceptable political dissent.
Yes. The source notes that the host's actions, like criticizing the sitting president on air, would be considered disrespectful, and met with huge backlash if they were performed by commentators criticizing the current.
But it's tolerated when it's the host's flavor of shit being...
It's an argument about selective outrage and institutional protection. The source suggests that when their political opponents use media platforms to criticize power, they are shielded and celebrated because they are aligning with the prevailing media narrative.
But when others criticize the current political establishment,
they face shadow banning or genuine suppression. The claim is that freedom of speech is only applied selectively based on whose political message benefits.
So the host is not a champion of free speech, according to the source,
but a protected corporate asset pushing a tolerated, profitable political message.
So after this whole high-profile alternative Christmas message broadcast in the UK, a speech intended to resonate globally, what was the reaction back home in the United States? The source material suggests it was overwhelmingly silent.
The U.S. reaction was characterized by a distinct lack of interest, which the source uses to great rhetorical effect.
How do they illustrate that?
To illustrate this, the source quoted a reaction from someone identified as White House spokesperson Abigail Jackson, which was frankly devastating in dismissal.
What was the quote?
The quote was, "Reacting to Jimmy Kimmel's Christmas speech would require me to watch it, and like many Americans, I didn't even know it was happening."
Oof, that quote perfectly encapsulates the source's claim.
It does.
The host's message, meant to be this grand international statement on freedom, completely failed to register with the very people he claimed to represent. He ran over to the UK, did this grandstand, and nobody in his own country cared enough to even watch it.
And this lack of U.S. audience engagement is then used to fuel the source's next major claim,
which is
that the host didn't just criticize the former president, he threw the whole fucking country under the bus, thereby insulting the American people themselves.
How does the source justify that severe an interpretation? What did he say that insulted the entire country?
By apologizing on behalf of the U.S., calling Americans stupid and suggesting the UK got it figured out, the source suggests he generalized the entire country as foolish and ignorant.
They have a quote for his tone.
They characterize his tone as saying, "We are not bright. We're Americans. No one knows better than. No one thinks you're smart."
And this is seen as a profound betrayal.
Especially coming from someone who has benefited so immensely from the American system and the robust media freedoms it provides.
This leads to a powerful critique regarding loyalty and privilege. The source attacks highly privileged Americans like the host.
They mention others too. Actor Mark Ruffalo comes up.
Right, and they accuse them of throwing America under the bus while benefiting from the very system that made them millionaires.
The source argues that while you don't have to love every person in office, there's a certain expectation that you should love and respect America and what it has attempted.
And they characterize the host's act
as shitting on everybody who's fought and died for this country and for freedom of, while claiming that there is no freedom.
It's an assertion that this specific privileged media class demonstrates a fundamental lack of loyalty and respect for the constitutional and structural foundation that enabled their success.
And the critique concludes with that cyclical maximalist flourish, the final incite,
bringing us full circle back to the legal context of the UK.
Yes. The source concludes by accusing the host of inciting riots. They summarize their position by saying that, by telling people to protest the government if they can't say what they...
All while speaking in a country that allegedly has strict controls on speech.
Including the inability to criticize the monarchy without potential legal consequences. The host is seen as recklessly provoking civil unrest in a foreign country where freedom of expression far more tightly regulated.
So they don't see him as a savior.
They paint the host not as a savior, but as an agent of chaos, using politically charged rhetoric to boost his own flag.
A truly maximalist interpretation of a Christmas message. But the entire deep dive from the source focuses so intensely on the spectacular hypocrisy of his choice of location and his personal career history.
Using his $16 million salary as the central piece of evidence that his claims of persecution are fundamental fraud.
So if we synthesize this entire deep dive, the conflict wasn't truly about the content of the host's speech.
No, which was fairly standard political critique at the end of the day. It was about the context and the message. It became an ideological and highly detailed fight over who gets to define tyranny in the modern...
We've seen three completely different types of alleged censorship presented here.
We have...
First, the disputed political pressure the host claimed to face. Second, the sophisticated corporate control and affiliate shielding that the sources claimed was the real maneuver.
And third, the social media regulation and wrongthink constraints that the sources claim are the real systemic threat facing everyday citizens.
The central irony remains stark, and this is what really defines the source material.
What's that?
The critics are using the unfettered platform of American Freedom YouTube, which is protected by U.S. free speech norm, to criticize a comedian who they claim is misunderstanding or minimizing the real subtle threats to free expression.
all while he's operating from a position of immense financial and media privilege that makes his claims of victimhood highly questionable. The source, despite its own heated rhetoric, is fundamentally defending the robust American system that allows this entire debate to happen without the threat of legal action.
And here's where it gets really interesting for you, the listener. We have explored claims of corporate shielding, international legal differences regarding offensive speech,
and political bias shaping what counts as misinformation on the platforms you use every single day.
We have seen how high-stakes corporate maneuvering involving companies like Disney and the FCC can be successfully masked by leveraging political outrage.
So the question we are left with, and the one that truly encapsulates the divide exposed by this deep dive, when a highly paid, multi-million-dollar media figure claims persecution, a figure who still maintains their public platform, their massive salary, and their wide reach, how do you determine if they are a genuine martyr bravely seeking power?
Or if they are simply leveraging manufactured controversy and the profitable narrative of persecution for sustained relevance, higher contractual value, and a renewed slot on the national stage.
What stands out to you when wealth and victimhood are combined in one message? That's what we